Welcome to the Beyond Church Raising Leaders podcast. My name is Rachel and I'm here with my husband, Luke.
Thank you. Pleased to be here.
I didn't welcome you, but you said thank you anyway. And we are here to talk about your message that you preached at our church on Sunday, something new that we're trying to help to unpack some of what it is that we're talking about as a whole church. At our church at the moment, we're talking about money and what God and the Bible say about money. Mm-hmm. And so it is a little bit difficult to just in the course of a 20 to 30 minute preach on a Sunday morning, take a deep dive into probably more some of the practical applications of some of the theology that we're sharing on a Sunday. So we just thought we'd try this.
That's right. This is our second.
Here we are.
Last week we spoke specifically about tithing.
Yes, we did.
From your message.
Yep.
And so that was a really good conversation to get into the weeds about what that looks like and how that can be applied for families and for individuals. So that was good. Yep. Definitely worth a re-listen if you haven't caught it already.
Back. Yeah. And so let's go to your message from Sunday, to which you gave a clickbait title.
The clickbait title, which will have to go on this podcast title and on the YouTube clip if we get there, which is 5 shocking realities. Is that right? 5 shocking realities you did not know about your own finances. Do
you know what that makes me think of?
What?
Like one of those images of like a pimple about to pop or something that you see on all those clickbait, or
like shocking,
or the like the current affair red stamp, bang, 5 shocking realities about.
That's the idea.
So what did you want to shock us with?
The safer title was called Money Matters.
Yeah, that's a bit boring.
Yeah. Oh, what do I want to shock you with? Well, it is about. Well, the Money Matters is it is better because I think it's clearer about what the message was about.
It does make sense.
Which is, the message really was just about making sure that we understood what the Bible teaches about the importance of money or how it does matter in our lives, and therefore, if it matters, how we should be using it.
Yeah.
So I talked a little bit about, how the Bible explains that money is important for us and our relationship with God and each other. And the first way that I did it was just reminded us that money isn't ours, that all things are from God and that all things are for God. And so that's a very basic theological concept. But people seem to forget that it applies actually to everything, including our financial world, our money. So that's kind of what I shared initially.
I think that was the most confronting of your points that, for me personally,
Thank you.
Different things hit people in different ways. But, I had the opportunity to read your notes before you presented your message at the end of last week. And when I read that, because your point title was you're not an owner, you're a manager. And I was like, whoa, hang on a minute there. I quite like being the owner of my own money and the master of how it gets used. And I was thinking about, well, I'm more than just a manager. Like I'm a good steward and blah, blah, blah. But when you do bring it back down to like actual ownership, you're right. It is God's. And it also reminded me of like a thing that we say in our house to our kids when they're fighting over their belongings. And when they're reluctant to give their stuff to, like when they're reluctant to share their belongings or to pass down something that they've dearly loved to a younger sibling who it might suit better, and they say, but it's mine. And you and I say, no, everything in this house is ours. Right. But really, everything in this house is God's.
If it's under this roof, it's mine. And we'll decide who it's shared with or otherwise.
Yeah. But what you're saying is it's a good core principle to try and get right in your heart that everything that you have is actually God's, and it changes how you think about it, changes what you do with it.
Yeah, and I think that the thing that should happen in us is that we should be firstly grateful.
Yeah.
Because if it's a gift to us, because God is all-powerful and what we have is his generosity toward us. And so if we have that concept, then we are grateful for it, but then we're also faithful with it. And so we want to do well with what we've got. So I just think that's what changes, as opposed to having an entitled mindset and a careless mindset toward money, which is, I think, the opposite of what could happen there, where you, it's like about having a good employee and a bad employee. A good employee sees what they've got as a responsibility to be handled well. But, if you've ever had a bad employee or even a co-worker, the thing that I think differentiates them is the fact that they have this sense of entitlement. So I'm entitled to this position or this role, therefore I can just turn up when I want and do what I want. I can be careless about what I've been given to steward. And so I think the good response to knowing that it's not ours, but it's God's, is to be grateful and to be faithful.
I reckon that the entitlement around money can maybe best be described as, in our culture, the I deserve thinking or I deserve statements. And you hear it a lot. And you hear it across different areas of people's lives, but I think particularly in relation to money, people might get around saying, well, I deserve to be paid this much money, or I deserve to live in a house that's got an ensuite in the master bedroom, or, I deserve that chocolate bar because I just ran around the block, or, you know what I mean? Like I think for me, it might be a simple way to kind of do a heart check maybe about whether you're starting to edge onto entitlement rather than gratitude, thinking I deserve kind of statements, and that it's very easy for us to all fall into that thinking because it's all around us, in the world all around us. What about your next point?
My next point?
Yeah.
But was there anything about the message that, other than the fact the first point was the one that was the most offensive to you?
Yeah.
Just overall, what was the big takeaway for you?
That doesn't work, asking me that question.
Why? Because you got lots of takeaways, or you don't take anything away?
No,
you
because
leave it all there.
No, because I think I know what you want the takeaway to be.
Oh, really?
So,
I've got no idea.
But I'm not sure that it was necessarily my personal takeaway.
Okay. Well, we're also inviting people to contribute or to inquire from us as well. So the whole point of this extra deep dive into the message is to create another platform for people to engage with the content. So they could ask questions. You can send them in through the email, internet machine, contact@beyondchurch.org.au.
Yeah.
My big takeaway that I wanted people to take away from the message was that money did matter, very much so, to how we are to respond to God and how we are to behave with our finances. So we just can't pretend like it'll just take care of itself. And even when we do begin to engage with our money, then we start to suffer the other problem of the temptation to make it about us and not about God. And even when we start to discover the power of managing our money, we can then we have a tendency toward building something that's for our own benefit and our own good, as opposed to using our money to build something that's for the glory of God. And that was my second thought, which was that we should be people who see the stewardship of the finances that we have. We should be people who see it as building a legacy, a kingdom legacy, not building an empire. And so the difference between leaving a legacy and building an empire is that leaving a legacy says that I'm going to bring glory to God now and forever. So it has an eternal kind of mindset. But building an empire is about bringing glory to ourselves and bringing glory to ourselves for today. And when I think about that, I think what a shame, or what a small way of thinking, to be the kind of person that wants to build an empire that lasts only a generation, or only lasts here in the temporary and has no eternal significance. And so the challenge is to be the kind of person that thinks beyond the here and now, thinks into eternity, and then uses their money to build the kingdom, not to build an empire, which is, I think, pretty challenging for people who have that understanding.
Yeah, it makes me think about because the focus that you've given it there is that we're attributing eternal significance to our money as much as to our time, what we spend our time on while we're here on earth and before we go and meet Jesus face to face. But there's also a thought there about seeing money as something that can be of benefit beyond your lifetime. And I was reading this article the other day about superannuation and how the whole kind of superannuation system is built around this idea, in Australia at least, and the pension system is built around this idea that because the government's going to run out of money to support pensioners because of the ageing population, etc., that the superannuation system is built in there to kind of acquire savings to help care for you, provide for you in your later years when you're no longer working full time or whatever. And it's based on the idea that you can, that old term ski, like spend the kids' inheritance now,
yes.
like that all you'll have is just enough
to
provide for you, just you and maybe your partner if you've got a partner, until you die, to cover the fact that you're no longer working. And there's no kind of long-term thinking in that. There's no generational thinking in that. And I guess it kind of creates a small mindset. It creates small thinking. If you're so worried about your provision just for your basic needs that you can't think like beyond yourself. You can't think, beyond like what am I going to need right now or even for the next 20 years. Like what am I building both not just spiritually but financially for the future generations.
And I always find it a bit frustrating when I'm talking to people about their money, or often when I want to pray for people about their money and about their financial position, and often I'll invite people to be prayed for about that. But sometimes people think, well, I've got enough money I don't need prayer or support or help, or I don't need to believe God for a miracle because I've got enough money to do what I need to do. I'm doing really well. Like, go and pray for someone who's really struggling,
who's homeless,
who really needs some support or some help or whatever. But the reason that frustrates me is because, like, why wouldn't you want more? Not for yourself, but so that you can be a blessing to other people. So I kind of would push back on that and say, well, what kind of creative thoughts or ideas could you have that's going to build the kingdom, not just for yourself today? It's a bit confronting, but sometimes if you're the kind of person that says, oh no, I'm okay, I've got enough, I'm satisfied, I'm content with where I am, what I've got. Okay, it could be confronting, but I'd say, well, that's probably not a kingdom mindset. That's a selfish mindset. A kingdom mindset says, how can I leverage my current position to build something that's beyond me, that's going to bless and support, help, care for others, either within my family, but also outside of my family, and also into the generations to come. So, if you're ever invited to be prayed for about your finances, I reckon that everyone should always put their hand up and say, please, pray that blessing would come my way, that I'd have strategies about how I can build, the kingdom of God, and so that not just get out of a difficult place, but be able to build something of significance into the future. Yeah, so that's my little rant.
Yeah, no, that's good. And so then once, like, we're kind of following a train of thought here, like once you kind of have that shock or discomfort or whatever the feeling is for you of realizing that you're just a manager of God's God's generosity toward you, everything that you have is from God. Once you get past that, and then once you get past, oh, my money's actually not about me for this second reason, which is that it's about eternity and it's about the things that what really matters and building a legacy that's about community and about eternity and not just building an empire for myself and putting a pool in the backyard and sitting by it, sipping my iced water and just being happy.
Sounds great. Love a nice sip of iced water. Delicious.
Well, then you come down to, the how. some of the how.
Yes. Before you go on to the how,
Yeah.
I just want to make one more point,
Yeah.
because I also think it's a helpful way to shift your thinking about investing your money into things, and why it is important to do the kingdom building, because sometimes we think that like kingdom building or investing our money into the things of God is just about building more stuff, more buildings, more wealth, more money for the generations to come, for the kingdom, etc. But the Bible actually speaks about it quite differently to that. So yes, that is an outcome. But one of the verses I shared on Sunday, and when I was preparing this message, this verse really spoke to me in a really fresh way. And it's from 1 Timothy 6, verse 18 to 19. And it says, remind the wealthy, this is Paul speaking to his disciple Timothy in his church at the time. He says, remind the wealthy, which at the time was all those people, and that's you and I, to be rich in remarkable works of extravagant generosity to share with others. So practically make like using your money to be generous with. That's what he's talking about. But then the next line says, these spiritual investments will provide a beautiful foundation for their lives and secure for them a great future as they lay their hands on the meaning of life. So, what that verse is saying is that money, when it's invested in the kingdom of God, doesn't just have a practical outcome, but it has a spiritual outcome. And so that's another reason why it's more important to be a kingdom builder than a legacy leaver than a empire builder, because your money has a impact that goes beyond just the practicalities of life. It shifts a person's spiritual life and helps them to discover the true meaning of life. And you even see that with, and you want to talk about practical ways to do that. One way that you can see that reality about your money having a spiritual shift is even like in your marriage. So, Rach and I do this thing where we budget to have money spent on our marriage. We call in our budget, it's called
Marriage enrichment.
Marriage enrichment. And so every year we have money set aside to invest into that. So does that mean that we become a richer couple and we're wealthier and we have more money? No. But it means we're healthier. We have a healthier marriage. It makes a spiritual difference and an emotional difference, psychological difference. So we're healthier because we spent money on something. And I think that's something to remember too, that money is just not about building another layer of financial increase, but it's also about it makes a spiritual difference in people's lives as well.
Well, you've kind of moved into there like what I was getting excited to talk about, which is, of course, budgeting.
What an exciting subject. Can't wait to talk about budgeting.
Well, because your next point was about money being on mission and not being missing in action.
Ooh, and did you like that point?
I did actually, and I didn't get it at face value, to be honest. But when you unpacked it and you were talking about how having your money not go missing in action is kind of knowing where it is, where it goes.
Yeah.
What's happened to it? Where's it being spent? I think sometimes, I don't know, you tell me what your opinion is, but I have a feeling that people think that kind of behind the scenes work of writing down what you're going to spend money on and then going back and checking actually whether that's what you did spend your money on once it's gone, reconciling your money, whether people think that that's not necessary for all of these other big grand concepts that what's the link?
Yeah, well, let me read you this verse. So this is...
it's in the Bible.
Yeah, imagine that. Or did I get rid of that verse? I can't remember. Is it here?
You could just make it up and then we'll find out whether anybody ever actually listens to this.
Oh, that's true. We could get excommunicated. I can't find it now. But the point is that I must have deleted that verse, but it's along the same lines of spontaneous generosity. I used that phrase on Sunday.
I wonder if I've got it here.
Spontaneous generosity. I think I got rid of it. Have you got it there?
Give freely and spontaneously.
Yeah, so...
Don't have a stingy heart.
Yeah.
The way you handle matters like this triggers your God's blessing in everything you do, all your work and ventures.
Yes, that's that same idea that being extravagant, generous, spontaneous in our financial world, it has a impact on every part of our life. But the clincher there is spontaneity. And so you asked, how does budgeting allow us to live these biblical principles? Well, there's no other way to live out those biblical principles other than getting the foundations right. And when, for example, Rachel and I do sometimes like to be spontaneous and do things that, are unplanned for when it comes to our finances.
Yeah, and this would be an area that I would have I think this is a tension that we've had in our marriage with how we...
Yeah, so I'm happy to go, so one night we were out, I shared this story on Sunday, we're having dinner together, and there's a couple having dinner across from us, and we wanted to shout them dinner, and so we just, it's a spontaneous thought, you can't plan for that, you don't know what's going to happen, and we just thought, okay, great. Now, I'm the kind of person that before being organised and having a budget, I'd just go and spend some money and think, yeah, that's a good idea, and do it. So this particular night, we followed that leading, we did it, but the reason we could do it wasn't because we were just frivolous and thoughtless and didn't consider having the finances to do it, but we had done the work to build into our annual budget a line item that's called generosity, which makes room for us to be spontaneous and extravagant. And it may seem like it's unplanned, but it's very much so. Well, at least the room is created for spontaneity if you do have a budget. Is that what you're asking?
Well, what I was going to say was that I think the tension in the relationship came because you are naturally more spontaneous and I'm naturally more of a planner. And so then when you try to bring those two people together, like we know that a large, I think you know the stat, the number of percentage of conflict in a marriage relationship is about money. And so that's one of the touch points for us in the past has been, you coming to me and saying, I feel like God's told me we should go and pay for this for that person, or we should spend money on this. And then me as like high responsibility values would be like, well, we haven't planned for that. We haven't budgeted for that. And then I feel stressed because I don't know how we're going to do that and still be responsible and still be good stewards like we talked about at the start. And so, what might be helpful for people where we've come to kind of balance those two things because they're both good things. Like the spontaneity and the generosity, the natural generosity that you have is a really good thing. But the high responsibility and the good stewardship that I have is also a really good thing. So, let's talk to God about how we get the best of both worlds. And what we've come to is budgeting, as you're saying, to be spontaneous, budgeting to be able to be generous. And so that has actually empowered me to become much more generous, I think, because I know that the money is there. Like we've already made the sacrifice. We've already decided to not spend money on other things so that we've got money there available to bless people or be generous when we feel like, we hear that, we get that prompting from the Holy Spirit and then I feel like I can completely trust you and this has happened a number of times. It's one of our favourite little things to do where, we'll just be randomly at dinner or something and like the example you've just given and you'll say, I feel like God's saying we should just pay for that family's meal or we actually had a better one this year.
Did we?
Yeah. When we were on holidays at the start,
of the year. That was at Noosa.
We were at Noosa on holidays and we were just...
Oh, that's right. That's a good story. I should have told that one on Sunday.
I know. Oh, we just retold the one from Sunday today.
Yeah, well, you tell this one.
So this one was good because we were on holidays at Noosa. We were just out for dinner with the family and you came to me and you said, I feel like we should pay for this family's dinner next to us.
It was a couple, wasn't it?
It was a couple. It looked like a husband and wife.
They were very young.
Yeah. And so straight away I was like, yeah, good. I was like, how are you going to make that happen? Because I start then thinking about like...
Yeah, I love making it happen. I love it.
I start thinking about how we're going to do it so that they don't know and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, you're like, this is your challenge. You love it. It's your favourite thing. So you're like, leave it with me. It's like got your superhero cape on.
Yep.
Like, I was made for this. Anyway, so you go over to the wait staff or whatever. You say to them whatever you say, pay for their thing, sit back down. We just, like, they're none the wiser. We're still sitting beside them. We just go back to having our dinner with our kids. And then we see them later on go up to pay, and whatever conversation has happened over there, they like, your plan fails.
Yeah, my plan backfires slightly. I do always say to the staff, make sure that this is anonymous. Just let them know it's been paid for. If they say, oh, who paid for it? Just say, oh, someone anonymously paid for it. But anyway they must have insisted maybe on knowing or something. So
that failed. But what's a cool ending to the story is that then they come over to us because they've been told that it was us that paid for their dinner, and they said, oh, did you just pay for our dinner? And we were like, yeah.
Actually, I don't think the kids knew either, did they?
No, the kids didn't. We hadn't had a chance to tell them.
Yeah.
Because they were still sitting next to us that whole time.
Yeah.
We couldn't talk about it. We were just like
That's
making
right.
eyes. We were probably texting each other across the table.
I think we did text each other. That's right.
Like, are we going to pay for this? Sure, let's pay for it. Anyway, so they come over, they go, did you pay for it? We're kind of awkwardly, yes, we paid for it. And then they were like, they just told us how blessed they were because I think it was her birthday and it was the first time that they'd been out for dinner together on their own without their new baby daughter, who was their eldest child.
Yes, that's right.
And it was just like, wow,
what a nice treat.
Well, and it was just so obvious that it was a God thing because, like, we so value families and, to get to be a part of them having a great night out for their first night out of the house to have dinner together after having a baby and for her birthday. It was just a neat little package.
I know. So we are pleased that they found out this time.
Yeah, well, I mean, we got to be blessed by it from hearing that story.
And we weren't even going to tell the kids, I don't think. But then they found out because the couple came over to us. And then the other part of that was that, we obviously then were not meaning to, but modelling that for our kids. And our kids kind of felt, you can see.
It sparked something in them.
Yeah, it sparked something in them too. So
because then we started having conversation about generosity and how this had happened to you and I the year before when we were on holidays, remember, in Queensland.
Oh, that's right. Somebody bought us.
We were
the people that got blessed.
And we hadn't done it for ages.
And we're old. No one blesses old people anymore.
And I think we were having a fight too. I think we were having like a terrible night. We were arguing.
That might have been why they did it.
And anyway, somebody paid for ours and you went up to them.
Yes.
Same things, that their person failed and told us who had paid for it, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And but that's re-sparked something in us. We were like, we haven't done that for our thing. We haven't done that for ages. And so we kind of got back into a thing.
Yeah.
And then our kids hearing that it had happened, it sparked something in them. Like it's like it plants the generosity seed and they start looking around for opportunities to...
Haven't blessed me with the meal yet.
We got to start that again.
No, I'm saying our kids haven't blessed us with the meal out yet, have they?
No, I know, but... Oh, no, that's not true. We have... Zara has blessed us with a dinner out.
That's
before.
true. And actually
the whole
breakfast.
family, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. She did too. Anyway, if you're listening, guys, you can always,
build it into your kids.
No, I'm talking about if our kids are listening. I don't think they do, but if they were, anyway. So that was all about being empowered by generosity. Generosity being empowered by planning. Planning to be generous, but so spontaneous generosity doesn't mean unwise. It means planned. To be spontaneous.
Yeah.
And yes, and that's about budgeting.
Yeah.
And so one of the things, I guess the final thought on this whole idea of this is the fifth thing or whatever it is, this might be the fourth thing, that you, the fourth shocking reality that you did not know about your own finances is when we're budgeting, we're planning, we should do it with an abundance mindset. I see so many people budgeting with a scarcity mindset. And here's the difference. What, are you ready for this?
Just don't preach it to me.
A scarcity mindset asks the question, what will I do when I run out of money? But an abundance mindset plans by asking the question, what will I do when I run into money? So in other words, a scarcity mindset is small thinking, and abundance mindset is big thinking. Because both of those kinds of thinking, they demand from us creativity in our budgeting. They both demand strategy. They both demand execution. But one mindset, the scarcity mindset, leaves you, in my experience, with less, and also less room for God to move and bring a miracle to bear in your finances. But an abundance mindset makes room for more. And it's still wise. You're still creative.
You still do the work.
You still do the work. You still reconcile your expenses. You do all those things you would do. But the mindset shift makes all the difference. That I'm going to be the kind of person that has the faith to believe that I serve a God who loves me, who is the God of abundance, who is the God of more than enough, who's the God who, the Bible says, owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, the God who, believes in you and wants the best for you. And it just changes the way that you prepare for the future when you have an abundance mindset versus a scarcity mindset. It just means you're thinking, okay, well, there's always going to be a way. There'll be a way forward somehow. Like, God's not wanting to hold me back. He's not wanting to make it hard for me. And so even though the circumstances, might be challenging, we can have faith to believe that our God is for us. So it's just a slight shift in the way we think about budgeting.
Yeah, but it's not a slight shift; it's a huge shift.
True.
And it takes a lot. Sometimes it just it requires a complete transformation, really, in who you are as you become more like Jesus and as you trust God more. And I say that because I know that, because that's my experience, because I feel like what is naturally ingrained in me for whatever reason has been a scarcity mindset. Maybe it's being one of 6 children, where you worry about whether there's enough to go around, or, you fight for your portion when things are being shared out or whatever. To then having to become, wanting to be the kind of person who can trust God that his provision will always be there and that he's the God of more than enough. Like all those scriptures, I'm not going to read through them. You can go back and watch the message, but so many scriptures that you shared on Sunday, and there are even more in the Bible that remind us again and again and again that God is a more than enough God. He's a God who wants to bless his people, who's got unlimited resources and wants to share them, wants to be generous with us. So the issue really is trust, the transformation toward trust that God is actually who he says he is, and the belief that, like you're saying, mindset, to believe that he actually loves us as much as he says that he does, and that he wants the best for us. He wants to bless us, wants to be generous to us. And so you and I were talking this morning, just because, to be very frank, I'll speak for myself. I'm having a day where I'm having to hold on to trusting God that's been built over a long period of time, to hold on to that kind of a mindset of abundance rather than scarcity, because the natural circumstances in the world around me at the moment would push me toward going back to my old self of thinking there's not going to be enough, and so I have to reduce my dreams, or I have to pull back from what my hopes were, what I wanted to believe was possible with God, to something that's a bit safer, or I feel like I could make happen myself.
Yeah.
And so that got us talking about the spiritual element
Yeah.
of what we're talking about.
Yeah, and as we shared earlier in this episode, the investment of money into the things of God is a spiritual investment. And so whenever we take spiritual ground as a person of God or as a community of faith, there is an enemy at work that is trying to push us back and keep ground for themselves. We wholeheartedly believe that there is a war at work in the spirit of good and evil, and that the church is God's mechanism, is God's tool in the world to bring victory over the things that are evil. And so when faithful people of God are doing well in their financial world, their mindset, their thinking, their abundance mindset, their budgeting, their planning, they're building the kingdom, that's going to stir some stuff up in the spiritual realm, in the spiritual world.
Yeah.
And there's going to be opposition against people who are doing the things in their life that move the kingdom of God forward. And so don't be surprised or shocked if when you begin to get yourself sorted and your life in order biblically when it comes to your money, you come under some kind of opposition. You come under some kind of attack, or you find like you're coming up against a brick wall for a season, or you begin to have self-doubt, or there's thoughts that come to you that you know aren't really of God, but you start to believe them, or even things might circumstantially begin to change for you when you find it more difficult to believe God, that he's the God of abundance, the God of more than enough. So this is normal. This is common. So whenever you take spiritual ground, which is what getting your finances right is, then you're going to come up against opposition, full stop.
Yeah, because let's take it down to a practical level. If you were to make the decision to tithe for the first time, or to write a budget for the first time, and to, have a values-based budget or a vision-based budget that was moving yourself and your family forward towards the things of God.
Yeah.
If you were to start to, set yourself a goal to pay your bills on time and start to follow through on that, or if you were to start to invest for long-term, generational financial blessing, rather than spending all your money now, or reconciling, these are all little. Well, they're not little, but they're all things that you could practically start doing, and they seem like all they're doing is maybe being wise or following, what God's put in the Bible as things that you should do to be a good steward and to honour him with your money. But what you're saying is those decisions are actually taking spiritual ground and moving your family, yourself and your family, closer toward the things of God, which means don't be surprised if there's something that happens like in the next few days or week that all of a sudden makes you think that was a mistake. I shouldn't have done that. Or see, I knew I shouldn't have started trying to tithe. Or see, it doesn't work if you try and get, authority over your money by writing a budget.
Or even the doubt that comes about even starting those things. Because I often have conversations with people and they say, look, I either wouldn't even know where to start, or it wouldn't be worth it for me because I don't earn enough money, or look, I've got plenty of money, I don't need to worry about it because all my needs are met. Like all those kinds of things are just keeping you away from God's purpose and God's destiny, not just for you, because again, it's not about you, it's about leaving a legacy for the kingdom. So all those things are just keeping you away from taking the spiritual ground that this life is all about. And so, it's a challenge, but on the other side of that, the rewards are beyond measure because they're eternal. And so why wouldn't we be willing to pay the price to move ourselves, our marriages, our kids, our families, our communities, our churches, this world forward toward the things of God? Why wouldn't we want to pay the price? Because there's nothing that matters more. And in our current series, money matters, and it matters a lot because it's a reflection of our values, and it's a reflection of our purpose and our and the direction that our lives are going in.
And I think it's maybe helpful, that we use the word spiritual battle or the term spiritual battle, because it is something that you've got to kind of push through. You are going to feel some discomfort, and it's not going to feel nice when those thoughts come or the doubts come. Correct. And so then the natural tendency is to retreat to a place of comfort.
Yeah, but it's not, is it? It's not comfortable. It feels so much better to be able to, buy the family the dinner. The spontaneous generosity. It feels so much better to be able to, invest into your local church and see them, take ground, buy a building, or plant a church, or it feels good to make an actual difference in the world. And I reckon it's like that whole idea of delayed gratification. So yeah, sure, I like KFC and I'm going to love to eat that Zinger burger and it's going to cost me $10. But it's not going to feel better than seeing, my church buy their building or plant a church or, see families, lifted up out of difficult situations by their life group or their community. There's nothing better than that. So that whole idea of delayed gratification, it's a challenge for us today in our world. We're very much an instantaneous world. So
well, and that's what I'm suggesting, that we're I think there's probably a lot of us that aren't very practiced in, pushing past that feeling of discomfort to the victory. But, God's word also reminds us that we are the victors and we do get the victory. Like, we win every spiritual war or battle that there is to be won if we can stick with it.
Yeah, if you're willing to pay the price, and to go to war, the promise is victory.
Yeah. Well, we might leave it at that. Leave it at victory.
Oh, what a great way to end. On a high.
I know. That's always the way you should end, with a victory.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being here with me.
Oh, it's been my pleasure.
For this lunch hour.
It's been my pleasure.
And we will be back. Well, we'll be back whenever, but thanks to everybody who's joined us.
Yeah, and if you're still with us right now, let us know. Let us know that you're still here.
You keep pushing ahead with this. Contact us on an email address.
No, I'm like, well, if this gets to YouTube, you can leave a comment. That's easier. That's why YouTube's good for podcasts, because people can interact very easily on YouTube. It is hard on the podcast platform to actually engage, but on YouTube it's a lot easier because they can just write a comment and you can see what people are saying. It's like, oh, thanks for your comment. Oh, great question. I'll get back to you on that. It's pretty easy. Anyway.
I kind of preferred when we finished with the victory instead of a chat about YouTube.
All right, you're wrapping it up?
Yep. Thanks for being here with us on the Beyond Church Raising Leaders podcast.